in this one instance, he fucked up. So Dane, on to Epstein and him not killing himself this week.
Today's Epstein, and I'm just going to
with a heavy heart, by the way, I move on. I don't know about
not from me.
Pontiac over here.
So here's the thing, and I'm just going to get the Epstein out of the way because we're going to dedicate, obviously, the chunk to this segment because this segment could really be an entire episode by itself. The Epstein here is the sort of Pied Piper mentality of somebody who becomes a cultural phenomenon in one way or another, but through either having really poorly informed opinions himself or being instructed from others to, advance certain talking points and agendas. This is common in terms of the regime getting what it wants. Now, when I tell you who this individual is, you're going to be like, Dane, what are you talking about? This guy is stands opposite the regime on everything. And to that, I say, yes, he does. But the position that he's taking here, which we are going to take him to task for, maybe I a little bit more abrasively than David would care to join me in, is this is literally the worst thing that the regime does. And not just the regime, this is the worst thing that human beings do to each other. And he is advancing that cause and using his celebrity and his platform to do it. So that's problematic.
The lead's 6 feet under right now.
Yeah.
Do you want to keep shoveling on it, or you want to just get to the main?
Let's get to the main.
Brother Maynard.
Jordan Peterson.
Oh, good boy.
Now, I am not a hanger-on of everything Jordan Peterson says, so I can't sit here and say that he's never said something.
Nor should you be to anybody ever.
That he's never, except for us. You should hang on to every word we say because we're awesome.
Even us.
But so I'm sure that Jordan Peterson, in his many, many public appearances and books and et cetera, I'm sure he said things in other contexts and other subject matters that I also disagree with. But since, again, I don't know everything he said about everything, I don't know what those are. So for me personally, when I heard what we're getting ready to talk about, this is the first time where he said something that I disagreed with. And not only did I disagree with it, I disagreed with it vehemently, because we have told you time and time again on this podcast, I think this is true for both of us, that anti-war is probably the number one issue for us out of everything. It is for me. I don't know. I'm going to let David, second that if it's true. But war is, again, I'm mincing no words about this. It is the worst thing that human beings do to each other on a massive scale. And so to champion war in any respect is abhorrent to me. There is no moral virtue in it. And yet Jordan Peterson is going to make his level best effort to show you that there is.
I'll second the opinion, but that's only because I can't think of something funny to say right now. That's the only reason I'm seconding it. But no, war is the worst thing that you can do to any other human being, and because of the simple fact that there's no such thing as a just war. There's always going to be innocence involved. There's always going to be misrepresentation. There's always going to be dehumanization. So to say that violence is never the answer when you're in civil society, but violence always seems to be the answer when it comes to global affairs, and not just violence where I punch you in the face and you don't feel good about yourself. Violence where I blow your whole fucking family up and turn you against me for the rest of your life, and radicalize you, or vice versa. I get blown up, or worst case scenario, haven't seen it happen yet, but we've been knocking on the doorstep for the past at least year, maybe year and a half in Ukraine of a nuclear holocaust. We literally can blow the whole fucking planet up if we
many times over.
If we pick the wrong fight. So again, I feel like if we just used our words a little more often, And if we can't figure it out then maybe it's not worth figuring it out. I don't ever see a reason why there is a reason to go to war. Does that make sense? A reason for a reason? Sounds stupid, but
So, as we usually do when we are going to go in on somebody, we want to let them speak their mind in their own words before we respond to it. So, here is a 28-second clip. This is a clip from Jordan Peterson's podcast that was shared by another Twitter user, Michael Tracy. And like I said, 28 seconds, but this is what Jordan has to say about what he thinks the West should do with respect to the regime in Iran.
If any of you have been particularly taken by this story today, you could always put pen to paper and write your congressman or your senator and let them know that you're not all that happy about the situation in Iran, and that if the politicians got their act together and were stalwart in their opposition to this fundamentalist, totalitarian, misogynistic, brutal regime, that maybe it could be pushed over, and that would be a nice object lesson to totalitarian tyrants everywhere in the world.
Maybe it could be pushed over. Now, that sounds an awful lot like toppling the regime or regime change or, that shit that the United States has been doing since at least the 1950s with again, in this very same country, deposing Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran, which then led to the Shah, which was a brutal dictator supported by the Americans, a sock puppet dictator, which brutalized the people of Iran so much so that in the 1970s, the Ayatollah came to power in the Iranian Revolution, and then we had the Iranian hostage crisis, et cetera, and all of the frosty relations that have existed between Iran and the West has all stemmed from that first original regime change. And Jordan Peterson has apparently learned none of this history and is just content to, I guess, imbibe the regime's line of logic on this, or line of illogic, depending on how you look at it. And that, well, if you just screw up, just try again. And no matter how many times the United States has toppled a regime, which has led to, in things like Libya, a literal open-air slave trade, literally setting the country of Libya back 400 years, if you're talking about slavery now being legalized and open in public, or, something like Yemen, where it's still the largest ongoing humanitarian crisis in the world. And by the way, that humanitarian crisis is man-made with American support and logistics, or, what they did to the countries of Iraq and Afghanistan for the past 20 years. Everywhere you turn, the U.S. foreign policy establishment consensus has always done the same thing over and over and over again. Waste American blood and treasure for the profits of the military-industrial complex in the United States and in the broader West. And nothing ever changes in the countries other than more death and destruction, more starvation as a result of sanctions and other things, more death and destruction for the people that live in those countries that find themselves the unfortunate targets of the West. That I want to focus crystal clear on. That is what Peterson's calling for. We're going to get into the semantics of how he calls for it, but do not lose focus of that. Do not fall for his rhetorical leftist trick of throwing in the word misogynistic. Don't fall for that and lose focus on what he's advocating for is the literal worst thing that human beings could possibly do to each other. And regardless of his merits on a lot of other subjects, that is completely unforgivable.
Now I know what you're saying to yourself. You're saying, Dane, David, that's not the worst thing humans can do to one another. Misrepresenting their gender, getting their pronouns wrong. These are the things that truly matter. But I'm here to say, jokes aside, it is the worst thing that can happen. But also, we don't know. Technology is pretty cool nowadays. This could have been a deep fake. They could have just used a bunch of different things
That is true.
that made Jordan Peterson seem like a pro-war, pro-military kind of guy. Let's just get in there and fuck them up because they're doing things we don't agree with. Goddamn America.
That is a valid point. With the rise of deep fakes and shit like that, I will say that everything that I'm about to say in this segment in terms of going after Jordan Peterson is completely nullified if it later comes out that this was a deep fake and he says, hey, that wasn't me. I wouldn't advocate for that.
So
I will
here's the
say
back
that.
door, Epstein. Epstein, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Whatever. He did say pushover. Now, that could mean a lot of different things. Could mean that we just put, trade restrictions. We could
Maybe you know what those are
tighten
called?
the-
Those are called sanctions.
Yeah.
You know what sanctions do? They starve people. They starve them of food.
Quietly.
They starve them
We
of
don't
medicine.
have to see him get blown apart.
I forget what the statistics are, but it's hundreds of thousands of children have died in Yemen
Well, you know
from
what, Dave?
what?
Maybe they should fucking
what,
watch
David?
TGIF
From
Fridays.
bombs? No. Hundreds of thousands of children have been killed in Yemen because of cholera, because they don't have running water, because the United States is providing logistical support to the Saudis to bomb critical infrastructure that gives these people clean water.
Well,
You know what cholera makes you do?
don't vote for Biden.
Literally bleed out of both ends until you dehydrate and
I
die.
understand what cholera is. I died of it multiple times on the Oregon Trail. Okay? David died again from cholera.
So even sanctions.
It's just me in a green screen like this, like little pixelated green screen with shit coming out of both ends. Of course I know what cholera is, Dane. Don't act like I don't. I spent my time in Oregon Trail. All I'm saying is that he didn't necessarily call for violence.
Yeah.
Yes. Agree to disagree. But what I will say is, if he did, the old Batman quote, I got to throw in Batman whenever I can. If you murder a murderer, the number of murderers stays the same. So if you go and overthrow a totalitarian dictatorship, what does that make you? Kind of makes you a dictatorship, huh? Not just in your own country, but amongst the world. It says you have to agree to what I think that you should be doing at any given time, or else I'll show up. I'll just fucking eviscerate you. America. We love freedom, love our country, but if you disagree with us even in the slightest, we'll kill all of you. And not pleasantly either. So again, I'm hoping that this is a deep fake and it gets thrown out. And I'm hoping all he meant was come to the table and say, hey, knock it off, you guys, you little rascals. But if it's the way Dane sees it, it's pretty hard to defend him on this. And again, before I let the reins loose on the big fella over here, I will say that we're all human. We can all make mistakes. And when you put out enough content, as we've already seen, every now and again, you're going to fucking trip over your own shoelaces. That's all we're saying. In this one instance, he fucked up. Go ahead.
That is true. Despite what I've already said and despite what I'm getting ready to say, I want to pause for a second and say that this is also a teachable moment for us and everybody that listens and watches this podcast. Is as opposed to what leftists would do is, oh, this person said this one bad thing, let's throw the whole person away. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I can vehemently disagree with somebody largely perceived and probably actually is on quote unquote my side, in the sense that, we agree on a lot of different things. Like I said, for me personally, this is the first time I've heard something from Jordan Peterson that I'm supremely disappointed in. But that doesn't mean that he no longer has anything of value to say about any other subject that isn't this. So that's what we're not going to do. But that doesn't mean that somebody on your side shouldn't be called out. Because again, if we let something like this pass, we're no better than everybody else engaging in Manichaeanism that we always call out on this podcast too. just because he's largely on our team and up to this point has been for most of the time. And when I say our team, I mean, usually driven by logic and reason and seeing reality for what it is and all of that kind of stuff, not necessarily on our team ideologically. But for somebody that's largely on our team, this is highly disappointing, which is all the more reason to call it out. But I want to, with that being said, I want to go back in on him and say that, Jordan, I'm disappointed in you. I'm disappointed because in a very leftist way of crafting an argument, you use one of their favorite catchy buzzwords, not bigot, not racist. This time it's misogynistic. This regime is misogynistic. Now, an objection to me criticizing him for this is a valid one. It would say, well, Dane, wouldn't you say, compared to Western democracies, Iran is rather misogynistic? I mean, they intentionally keep women at a lower state in society and they don't let them do things and they favor men over women and all that kind of stuff.
We should look into that.
And I would say, David's going full Andrew Tate over there, but
no, I don't want to get arrested. I'm not involved in any sex trafficking or nothing.
I would say that yes, relatively speaking, in a vacuum, we can say objectively as a fact that on the spectrum of misogyny, that culture and society is more misogynistic than, say, a Western democracy. We can all agree with that. However, that's not why Jordan is using it. And the reason why I'm saying that with certainty that that's not the reason he's using it is because I've seen him argue before. He is very precise with the words he uses and the way he crafts his argument. So this is not an accident that he used this word. This is intentional in the same way that leftists use it. Now, why do leftists use these buzzwords? They use them as a proxy for moral high ground. They will make a claim unrelated to the buzzword, and they'll say, buzzword helped me get to my conclusion for why this thing is bad, why my claim is valid. In his case, why the United States needs to topple Iran's regime. Then you attach the buzzword, misogyny. And even if you don't explicitly state it, the subtle implication is, if you disagree with my conclusion that the United States should step in and topple Iran, then you are at least implicitly a little bit in favor of misogyny. And that's a red herring that shifts your focus away from what the ultimate conclusion is. And that's why I wanted to laser focus on what he's calling for is the worst thing that human beings can do to each other. Even if we grant the claim of misogyny and all that kind of stuff, that still would not justify wholesale carpet bombing an entire nation of people. Because not everybody partakes in that misogyny that he's saying is so terrible. And so, Jordan, listen, I would have a lot more respect for you if you came out with a utilitarian type argument and said, you know what? We know we're going to bomb innocent men, women, and children and probably starve several million more of them, but it's worth it. Because this misogyny is so bad that if we let this regime stay in power, the overall negative that's going to have an impact on the people of Iran, it'll be worse from that regime than from our bombs. Now, I would also disagree with that argument, but I would at least respect you because you at least kept it on point and you admitted that the thing you're asking for is wholesale destruction of the lives of millions of people. But that's not what you did you, Jordan? You threw out the word misogyny to make a boogeyman of this regime, and not to say that this regime has any merits or demerits, but that they're all saints and no demons. But you threw out that word for the same reason that leftists do it, this little rhetorical tactic to shift the focus away from what you're really arguing for, which is wholesale destruction of an entire society. And that's disgusting, Jordan. And not only is it disgusting, it's intellectually lazy for you to do that. It's intellectually lazy for the same reason that you call out leftists for doing it. So the fact that you would use their tactics to argue for what you argued for even makes me lose respect for you, the fact that you would do that. Again, on this topic, very specifically.
And again, lest we forget, they do have nuclear capabilities too, right? Because I think we tried to shut that down during the Obama administration.
They don't, but
they were working on it.
They're working on it for private uses of like having like nuclear factories. But it's a very big difference.
We could just nuke them. They wouldn't nuke us.
It's a very big difference to have nuclear.
So let's go to war
capable
Let's
factories
just fuck them up.
and have that be fissile material
They're
that
not
you
going to
can
hurt
use in
us.
weapons.
I'm still going to be able to watch all my streaming services on Netflix and
for sure.
Hulu and
Right.
HBO Max.
Right.
And then they'll just die over there.
Mhm.
I don't even have to see it. Right?
For sure.
Makes it totally fine.
Makes it a hell of a lot easier to palate. Yeah.
Tastes like a McDonald's McFlurry that never is in existence ever. So, have you satiated yourself on Epstein? I keep trying to fucking save Jordan. On Jordan Peterson flesh. Are we? Have you got your pound?
I think so. Jordan, do better. At the very minimum.
Hey,
very minimum, keep your argument as tight as you always do and stay logically consistent and be honest. Don't be disingenuous with trying to throw out, leftist buzzwords.
Can I go good cop for a second? Jordan, we know you're a good guy. 98% of what you've said over the years, we'd agree with wholesale. You just missed the mark. Just, one time. Just not going to hold it against you. Just do better next time.
There's always the opportunity to apologize and take it back.
Unless it's a deep fake. And then we can still
say that.
And we still love you. You know what? You're human. None of us are perfect.